From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. The largest U.S. oil producer has sued Cuban state-owned Cuba Petroleo and the Cemex Corporation in U.S. federal court. ExxonMobil is taking Cuba to court over a refinery, gas stations, and other assets nationalized in 1960 following the revolution. The news comes a day after the Trump administration allowed the U.S.'s long-dormant Helms-Burton Act to take effect. Cuba says that the act violates international law because its nationalization of property was legal. The government says that the full application of the act is political blackmail to toughen the economic and financial blockade against its people. Meanwhile, Canada, the EU, and other countries have threatened to take the issue to the World Trade Organization.
Cuban law protects us. The Helms-Burton law is null and void, and the majority of the countries that have investment and operation with Cuba. In Cuba today, there are anti-dirty laws that penalize companies that allow themselves to be pressured or that agree to act under a foreign law.
The so-called Lima group of Latin American allied countries to the United States has ended a meeting on Venezuela with no concrete solutions. 11 countries gathered in the capital of Peru for a meeting expected to announce decisive action. The final declaration did give explicit support to last Tuesday's failed coup attempt by Juan Guaido, but otherwise it repeated the group's earlier positions. Neither Mexico nor Guyana or St. Lucia attended. Spain's government has said it will not allow Venezuelan opposition figure Leopoldo López to carry out political activities from its embassy in Caracas. López took refuge in the Spanish embassy on Tuesday after escaping house arrest and taking part in a failed coup attempt. Spain's Foreign Minister Josep Borrell was speaking on a visit to Lebanon.
Spain will not permit its embassy to be converted into a center of political activity. We also are confident that under these conditions, Venezuela will respect the diplomatic immunity of the Spanish embassy.
The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, has called on CARICOM leaders to ensure the continued security and stability of the region in light of the situation in Venezuela. Dr. Rowley, who's the chairman of the Security Council for CARICOM and Law Enforcement, made the statement at the opening of the 19th special meeting of the Conference of CARICOM Heads of Government underway in Trinidad.
This is practicable.
Meanwhile, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines says that they stand ready to assist Venezuela in light of the recent events, calling them disturbing. In a statement, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves reaffirmed his country's commitment to upholding the UN Charter principles of respect for sovereignty, the rule of law, non-intervention, and non-interference. Following the death of former Peruvian President Alan Garcia, people who were part of his administration and close friends have been investigated for allegedly being part of a criminal network of corruption that was led by the former president. Here are the details.
Peru's public prosecutor's office has revealed the testimony of Miguel Atala, former vice president of the public company Petroperu and Alan Garcia's close friend, who confessed that Odebrecht gave him a bribe of $1.2 million in an offshore account in Andorra, which he then gave to Garcia.
I began to give money to the former president, Alan Garcia Perez. The first time I gave him around $20,000, $30,000, and then progressively I was giving him money. Every time he needed money, he'd call me and make an appointment at different places.
A court sentenced Miguel Atala to house arrest, while the former secretary to the presidency, Luis Nava, was sentenced to 3 years in preventative prison. According to the public prosecutor's office, they were part of a criminal network of corruption and money laundering formed by two pillars, government officials and those acting as a front for them.
Both groups had a double role. Firstly, to guarantee the corrupt business with Odebrecht through illegal payments and money transfers to offshore companies. And secondly, to accept all the requirements the company gave them within the Transport Ministry, including the deadlines, conditions, how to do things, and the place they had to be done.
The former Minister of Transport and Communications, Enrique Cornejo, is among those under investigation. He's accused of helping Odebrecht make huge profits by handpicking the company for the Lima Metro.
Around $100 million was stolen during the construction of the first section of the metro in Lima. Also, in the Transoceanic Road, money was given as a bribe. According to information we have from testimonies in the Brazilian investigation.
And so even after he took his own life, a cloud of corruption continues to hang over Alan Garcia's presidency.
This week, thousands of social leaders were in Bogota, Colombia, in what was called a refuge for life. They demanded guarantees to life and freedom, as they say that the government of Iván Duque has breached a number of promises. Afro-descendant communities, campesinos, and indigenous people held a number of actions to highlight issues, including the assassinations of social leaders, forced displacement, and disappearances in their territories. Earlier, I spoke with Ben Norton, a journalist with the Gray Zone, who is in Bogota, Colombia, covering the mobilizations this week.
So I came here to Colombia to report on what should be all over the English language corporate media, but of course is largely ignored, and that's the largest crisis of assassinations of activists in the entire world. Colombia has the dubious honor of having the highest rate of assassinations of human rights activists, more than any other country. And since 2016 in November, when the government of the former President Santos signed a peace agreement, a historic agreement with the FARC, and the FARC agreed to demilitarize and became a legal party, since then, more than 550 peace activists and social activists from different groups have been assassinated, including more than 130 members of the FARC itself. So former ex-combatants who agreed to put down their weapons and sign a peace agreement with the government, more than 130 have been assassinated, including some of their family members. So I came here to report on that. And Refugio Humanitario is an event that was over a series of 5 days that was highlighting the crisis here of assassinations, not only targeting former guerrillas from the communist groups, but also targeting indigenous activists, Afro-Colombian activists, women's rights activists, labor organizers, campesinos. All of these people are being targeted by paramilitaries that are linked to the government and that are linked to large landowners, large capitalists, and multinational corporations. So I, as a journalist, want to shed light on this. I think the entire corporate media should be talking about this. Instead, they're fixating obsessively on official enemies of the US government, like Venezuela. And that hypocrisy is really striking to me, being here in the capital of Colombia, and looking at the failed right-wing coup attempt in Venezuela. There's an obsessive fixation with Venezuela right next door, but almost nothing is said about the extreme violence going on right here in Colombia, a major U.S. ally, of course. The irony is that the Santos administration, which was also a right-wing administration, when they signed the peace agreement, it of course wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts. It wasn't because they necessarily want peace itself. One of the reasons they did it is because by ending part of the armed conflict, they could help further neoliberal development in the country and give, external contracts to multinational corporations. And I've been interviewing indigenous leaders, Afro-Colombian leaders in more rural departamentos here in Colombia. And one of the things that they're talking about is how, although of course it's good that the civil war has at least partially ended, although there still is violence. Although that part is good, the downside is that now that the FARC and some of these communists have demilitarized, now the Iván Duque administration is creating its own plan de desarrollo, its own plan of development, which is a very neoliberal right-wing plan that is allowing multinational corporations to mine resources on their land, which is leading to a lot of displacement of indigenous, Afro-Colombian, and campesino Colombians here. Also, we have seen the massive increase in monoculture production. So the thing was that these, guerrillas, the FARC and others, were essentially defending the land from multinational corporations. And now that they've demilitarized, multinational corporations have free access to exploit this area, and it's leading to not only violence but displacement. And in that way, a lot of people are, they're excited about the potential of a partial peace agreement, but they keep saying that the peace has not gone far enough. The government has not fulfilled all of its obligations under the already existing agreement, and the Duque administration is even more right-wing than the Santos administration and is following in the footsteps of the far-right Uribe administration that came before it.
Over 2 million citizens in Panama are set to participate in general elections on Sunday, May 5th. 7 candidates are running for office, with the candidate for the Democratic Revolutionary Party, Laurentino Cortizo, leading the polls. Romulo Rue from the Democratic Change Party follows Cortizo as independent candidate. Ricardo Lombana holds 3rd place. An Ecuadorian court has rejected the appeal of Swedish national Ola Bini, and he will remain in pretrial detention. He's accused of an alleged cyber attack and of collaborating with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Bini's lawyer requested his pre-trial detention be annulled so that he can defend himself freely. But one of the judges said that there's a risk of Bini interfering with the investigation if he's released due to his expertise in computing.
We cannot allow Ecuador to present itself like that, as a country that persecutes people for the books they read, for the technology they have, or simply because they have a friend who everyone rejects now, after thanking him in the past for showing to the whole world the atrocities that were committed in other sectors of the world.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. A cruise ship which had been quarantined for a confirmed measles case is now heading to Curacao. It left St. Lucia and is scheduled to arrive in the Dutch Caribbean island early Saturday. But authorities in Curacao have been debating how to respond to the Church of Scientology vessel, with 300 people aboard. The ship's doctor requested 100 vaccines after a female crew member was diagnosed with measles. That patient has reportedly rejoined the group and left St. Lucia late Thursday. Business and consumer confidence in Jamaica has reached record levels as it continues to implement an ambitious program of economic reforms. During an official visit to the island, the vice president of the Latin America and Caribbean World Bank says he's impressed with Jamaica's macroeconomic achievements.
I have to tell you that it is extremely impressive what I see in terms of the achievements macroeconomically. I don't know any country, and I've worked on many countries, that has achieved over a sustained period of time the fiscal adjustment and reforms that Jamaica has done, and produced a most spectacular reduction of its debt levels that reached almost 150% to fall this year below 100%. I can only congratulate the country for this. It's certainly a world achievement. Probably you would be number one in terms of that success.
Barbados remains in recession, with the economy contracting by roughly 0.2% in the first quarter. And while economic growth is predicted to be no more than 0.25% this year, the central bank governor says he believes that the island can achieve the spurt in growth it needs. A team from the International Monetary Fund will be in Barbados next week to check the progress of the economic reforms. This as the government is set to receive another $49 million from the IMF. And Barbados's Prime Minister Mia Mottley is opening up the island's media landscape. The government will be permitting other entities to apply for licenses to operate television stations. During a ceremony to rename Nation House, Mottley said it's not right that state-owned Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is allowed to continue to operate as a monopoly. She declared, quote, "We have committed to removing that because it is wrong, wrong, wrong." The European Union and other countries have criticized Ugandan authorities' decision to suspend dozens of journalists for allegedly breaching minimum broadcasting standards. On Thursday, Uganda's media regulator ordered 13 TV and radio stations to suspend 39 staff. The move was seen as punishment for stations that had broadcast this week's arrest of opposition MP Bobby Wine. In a joint statement, the diplomats urged the Ugandan government to respect the rule of law and allow all Ugandans to exercise their basic democratic rights. The World Health Organization says that 994 people have died from the ongoing Ebola epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The number is expected to hit 1,000 soon, amid fears of continued intense transmission of the virus. The organization plans to expand vaccination with an unlicensed new Ebola vaccine made by Johnson & Johnson, in addition to a Merck vaccine already being used. Security incidents continue to hamper the response to the Ebola outbreak.
As of 1st of May, we have 1,510 cases of Ebola virus disease in North Kivu and Ituri provinces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which includes 994 deaths. Dr. Tedros and Dr. Moeti, our regional director, have recently returned from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they found the situation on the ground to be worse than it has been previously.
Fuel transport workers in Tunisia have begun a 3-day strike to demand a long-promised pay increase. The Fuel Transport Workers Union had demanded that the government implement previously agreed upon monthly salary benefits increases of $100. Various gas stations have closed while motorists wait in line to buy gasoline. Small farmers in Eastern Africa are organizing to fight against new legislation that would greatly affect their work in countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. These farmers believe these laws only serve corporate interests.
Each farmer should have a copy of this law, a law for crops and for food, and of other laws as well which are threatening the work and resources of farmers.
If people are firm and demand respect for the 2010 Constitution, those laws will not pass.
These laws will disregard the basic principles of justice and freedom and directly will violate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The peasant farmer has not been involved, the civil society is not involved. Our seeds are our lives.
That law is actually attacking the backbone and the center of the rural life of our people. It's unconstitutional, and we are calling for all farmers.
According to the law's ambiguous text, indigenous seeds and animal manure could no longer be used.
Supply us with this fertilizer, but from that fertilizer is the generation of this baratika.
This is a plant that destroys corn crops from the roots, according to Okundi. In his house, Okundi cultivates indigenous seeds of a fruit he initially brought from the forest. He now has a bank of seeds.
And with 50 shillings, you get one seedling. You get even 100, and with 50 shillings, you get one seedling. That's why I told those people.
This is a variety of fruit that, like the forest of Migori, is in danger of extinction.
I'm expecting to get about 60 to 100 per month. Yeah.
He cultivates it in his orchard with cow's manure.
So sweet compared to the exotic ones.
The first one goes, the following started that way, for 12 months non-stop.
How long?
20 to 25 years. It engaged another opinion in my brain to use another method against the wind.
So your main challenge is wind?
Wind.
Maybe we can start thinking of how can we develop strong structures, especially in the AK project.
Okundi also develops commercial seeds to investigate and document their growth.
And graft it to this one. You can see the volume of this size and this one.
Yeah. It's different.
How do you compare if those people are telling us they are going to burn it, and when I put the exotic one, it destroys the plant, and this one...
The plant is doing well.
Healthy. I think these people, they must have a very dangerous plan.
We know that chemical inputs are harmful and are continuing to be used. Wake up.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Hundreds of protesters in Cyprus gathered outside the presidential palace in outrage over how the police handled a serial killer case that dates back to 2016. This after another body connected to the case was found in a river. A 35-year-old army officer has confessed to 7 killings in a crime spree that went undetected for nearly 3 years. In response, the president has sacked the police chief for botching the response to the crimes.
I have that kind of feelings that I'm not safe during walking in the street. Maybe somebody will go behind me, or somebody will do something that I don't know how to protect myself. So I have that written in my heart. That is so scary.
Israeli forces have killed 3 Palestinians, including a 19-year-old, during weekly Great March of Return protests along the border in Gaza. And earlier, 2 other Palestinians were killed in airstrikes on Gaza. Israel said that they were members of Hamas and that the strikes were a response to gunfire that wounded 2 Israeli soldiers. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since these protests began back in March of 2018. The United Nations has called on Israeli authorities to immediately halt the demolition of Palestinian-owned homes in East Jerusalem. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Palestine, Jamie McGoldrick, expressed concern at the increase in the number of homes being demolished every month. More than 100 houses have been destroyed since January, leaving hundreds of families homeless. Israeli authorities frequently demolish Palestinian homes for allegedly being built without permits. The United Nations Human Rights Office has called on the Hungarian government to stop starving rejected asylum seekers. Reports say that at least 21 migrants awaiting deportation have been deprived of food by authorities, some of them for up to 5 days. This is not the first time the anti-immigrant government of Prime Minister Viktor Orban received criticism for violating international humanitarian laws. And it comes just hours after he had met with Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini over forming a coalition against what they called illegal immigration.
The deliberate deprivation of food is prohibited under the Mandela rules and violates the rights to food and to health, as well as the prohibition of torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. We're asking Hungary to ensure that it fulfills its human rights obligations towards those deprived of liberty, regardless of whether they're in transit zones or in other places where migrants are detained.
A landmark study has found that men whose HIV infections were fully suppressed by antiretroviral drugs had no chance of infecting their partner. The European study monitored nearly 1,000 gay male couples over a period of 8 years. One partner was HIV positive and receiving antiretroviral treatment, while the other was HIV negative. Doctors did not find a single case of HIV transmission between partners who had sex without using condoms over the 8-year period. This raises hopes that widespread ART programs could eventually end new infections. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusorenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.